Hello, everyone. Good evening. I'm Susan Call. I'm the events advisor here at Politics and Prose, and it's my pleasure to welcome you this evening to our event with Aliah Wright and DC Frost, two authors published by the beloved indie Red Hen Press. And we also have the publisher of this imprint with us, Dr. Kate Gale, who will be moderating. Before I go any further, just a couple of probably familiar housekeeping items, but during the event, if you could silence your cell phones, and also after the event, if you don't mind helping us by folding up your chairs, we'd be grateful. We have books behind the register, and we'll do a signing right here when the event is over. And please, during the Q&A, we have a microphone right here. If you could step up to that with your questions, because we are filming this event. And please take a look at our calendar. We have a really very full fall, lots of great events, both here and at our two branches and at venues all over DC. So tonight we have two murder mysteries, which should be very fun. Aliah Wright's novel, Now You Owe Me, tracks a pair of serial killers on a spree in Pennsylvania. And every review I've seen and everyone I've talked to about this book just says it's very scary. So that should make it fun to listen to her read. And DC Frost's book, A Punishing Breed, takes place on the Los Angeles campus of Hesperia College, where the death of an administrator raises questions of class, race, and gender. And some of us who might have gone to a college that sounds a lot like Hesperia are finding this especially entertaining. Aliah Wright is a journalist who's worked for a variety of news outlets, including the AP and USA Today. And DC Frost, a second-generation Angelino, has worked for nearly 20 years at said small private liberal arts college in Los Angeles. And again, they're here with the Red Hen publisher, Dr. Kate Gale, who's an author herself, as well as a poet. And if that's not enough, she's also written 6 librettos, and there's many more accolades to her. So please help me welcome Aliah Wright, DC Frost, and Dr. Kate Gale. I think we're going to begin with a reading. Yeah. So are you going to begin, Aliah? Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm DC Frost, Denise Cecilia. I'm author of A Punishing Breed, and it's a Los Angeles noir for the 21st century. And this actually features a Los Angeles detective, DJ Arias, who hunts for a murderer on a small, unnamed college campus in LA. Well, it's actually Hesperia College, so we'll just leave it at that. DJ was responsible. There he runs into an ex-felon that DJ was responsible for putting in prison, and he finds jealousy, racial and sexual tensions, and a rigid academic hierarchy. He also finds, it's a love story, he finds the love of his life, a murdered man's dog who he adopts and names Evidence. And if you like your murder mystery with a dose of lethal college culture and a canine sidekick, I hope you read A Punishing Breed. Cold in California. Danny Mendoza drove the cart to Sliming Administration Center to begin his second day of work in the courtyard. Cold crept inside his jacket and work uniform as he stood outside the Lower East entrance. His memory crept back to frigid mornings in Chino's prison yard as he shifted from foot to foot, waiting for the head count. It was California cold, a chill born between mountains and sea that seeped into his bones, lingering until the midday sun warmed his scalp, face, and forearms. Danny unlocked the gravel, shovel, and pickaxe from the cart. None of the office workers came in this early before 6 a.m. It lessened the chance Danny would run into folks he wanted to avoid. Those who remembered his mother and the younger, more promising version of Danny Mendoza. Carrying heavy bags of gravel across the hall, through the finance office into the courtyard was a pain, but tending the cactus and cleaning up gravel pathways was mindless work, his favorite kind. Danny unlocked the exterior door of Lower Sliming, and with the override key and a 25-pound bag of gravel on one shoulder, and headed inside. The moment he stepped into the corridor, he knew something was wrong. He had developed a visceral ESP for danger at Chino. An electric current originated in his cervical spine and barreled into his sphincter muscle. Danny dropped the gravel, walked slowly down the hallway toward the lobby. The auxiliary lights were on. Hello? Anybody there? Danny heard mewling, as if a cat was trapped inside. No, it was whimpering. In the sickly glow of lights, he saw a woman sitting at the base of the circular stairs. One of the cleaning women. Which one? He moved closer. Emma Treat, skinny and pale, was curled into a near-fetal position on the bottom stair. What was she doing? Was she hurt? Was she praying? Then he smelled it. Vomit and pine sol. God, he thought, which scent was worse? Hello? Danny said. Are you all right? The crying continued. Of course she wasn't all right. What a stupid prick he was. Danny didn't want anything to do with a crying woman. Maybe she was hurt, or worse, heartbroken. She looked ill. Maybe she was pregnant with morning sickness. His high school girlfriend, Rena, had been pregnant, but no one knew about that. She had taken care of that lickety-split. She wasn't going to let Danny Mendoza's rambunctious sperm stop her forward trajectory. No way. I'll get over it, Rena had said. Emma Treat finally looked up at him, let out a strangled cry. There, she turned and pointed to the darkened office suite and the open door that yawned like a black hole. He was staying right where he was, thank you very much. Danny wanted to shake Emma Treat's pointy shoulders until she quieted down. Then he would lead her up to the stairs where sunlight broke across the campus, promising a calm day after the winds, all clean and swept away. But he couldn't bring himself to touch her. For 10 years, he hadn't touched a woman other than his mother. Perhaps he had never touched a woman, not even Rena, his high school girlfriend. Not really touched her in the way that counted. Danny had let her walk away without protest or an offer to help. He had his own forward trajectory. What is it? He barked. Emma cowered away from him, cried louder, and pointed again to the dark office. He felt like an asshole, yelling at the terrified woman. Danny dragged his unwilling feet toward the threshold of the office. The room was black and still, as if nothing had ever lived inside and never would again. His eyes adjusted to the dark room, barely touched by the yellow lobby light and now the glint of morning slipping through the courtyard's open door. There it was again, death. The white bloodless skin, the long curving sword, the body splayed out on its stomach and arms, the neck rigid as if the victim was overdoing his role. You got me. The shocked eyes frozen in morbidity that knew what was coming. Murder. Will Bloom was dead. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining both of us today. Now You Owe Me is a labor of love. It took several years to get to this point, and I'm so glad that each of you came out to hear me read from the book. So, what's this book about? It's about twin serial killers who go on a killing spree in their hometown in central Pennsylvania, and a young woman who is tenacious to go after them after they kidnap her best friend. The portion that I'm going to read from now is it happens after the death of one of their victims, and Ben is upset with his sister about what has progressed. He whirled around. Tallulah was gone. His stomach roiled. He hadn't seen this much blood since his father made quick work of Lenny when they were children. Ben saw red, and not just blood either. "What have you done?" Ben said, his voice calm. "You promised me you wouldn't kill her. I wasn't done with her yet." I didn't mean to," Corinthia said, trembling. "You promised me, Corinthia, you wouldn't do this anymore. I know," he heard her say, her voice soft. Her face twisted in anguish. "This will be the absolute last time, I swear it." Ben narrowed his eyes and huffed. "Where have I heard that before? Look at the mess you made. You know I hate when you do this. Look at all this damn blood. Why?" Corinthia spoke so fast her words seemed to trip all over each other when they fell from her lips. "I didn't want to kill her. It just happened. She tried to escape. There were hunters outside, Benji," Corinthia pleaded. "They were closer this time, too, and the window was open. What was I supposed to do? You could have knocked her out. You didn't have to kill her." "Did you hear me?" Her tone grew indignant, argumentative. "The window was open. She was yelling for help. I did not have a choice." "You could have closed the window, Corinthia. What's wrong with you?" "The same damn thing that's wrong with you." "I can't help it," they said simultaneously. Silence swept between them for a moment. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I know you wanted us to stop, that this should have been the last one." Ben's voice was thick with fury. "You will help me get another one, Corinthia." She blinked. "I should be enough, Benji." "You will never be enough," he bellowed. A furious Corinthia mumbled. She had it coming anyway. "What did you say?" "She killed somebody's child, Benji. And you killed somebody's mother." "Who? Cassidy?" "You said you wouldn't bring that girl up again," she whined. "And her death was all your fault. You knew she had a kid when you brought her here." Ben pursed his lips, threw his hands in the air, turned, and stormed from the room. Thank you.
So we're going to have a little discussion here and then take some questions from y'all. So I'm going to start with you. When I first read this book, I read it in pieces and then finally read it all together. I was really struck by the fact that for a book about murder, there's all these funny parts. And a lot of the funny parts have to do with the dog. And I felt like you were very interested in the dog. I think we're all now very interested in dogs and cats not being eaten, of course. The videos that have been sent to me today are many. Dogs and cats driving out of Ohio. But in your book, of course, first of all, the fact that he names the dog Evidence, but then just the moments between this detective and the dog really humanize him more than anything else. And I felt like it creates this layer of lightness in what's otherwise a very serious book, and indeed very much a book that has to do with class, race, and also this layer of him becoming aware of the ways in which he's a misogynist. So what made you decide to add the dog in?
Well, I thought that it was a way. Well, first of all, he just appeared. The dog appeared in the house, and I thought, what if if he does adopt the dog, he's going to have to then take ownership of it. And I do think sometimes if you can't have a relationship with a person, having a relationship with a dog is a great first step forward. So I really like that. And I think it does teach him to care about something and to start having sort of pangs of humanity, which he probably doesn't have a lot of, and sort of softens him as a reader, because he's not very nice at the beginning. And he's just lost his marriage, so he doesn't really feel like there's anything tethering him to the world. And so I think the dog sort of tethers him to the world and makes him feel responsible for something that's got a beating heart. And so, and as it moves forward, I think it gives him the feeling that maybe there is something more in his life. And as I move through and I'm writing the second book now, the dog becomes and stays very important.
So
And he's not eaten either, by the way.
I knew that was coming.
So with your book, one of the things that you do, which is sort of very Morrison-like, is you give us the very beginning of these characters. So one of the things that you give us the sense of who they were when they're children, and it isn't necessarily that we sympathize with them, but we do understand how they got there. Did you think a lot about that, wanting to sort of carve out these characters so that we understood who they were in the beginning, or did you just start at the beginning?
I think I just started at the beginning. For me, I wanted to tell a serial killer story from a different perspective. I wanted to make sure that the main characters who were the victims had a voice, but I also wanted to make sure that people understand how this could happen, how these killers were created. But originally there was just Ben. And then I was thinking, well, what if there are two killers instead of one? What if there's, what if they're related? Oh my God, what if they're twins? And so I went with it from there. But I wanted to take a close look at, well, how does someone turn into something like this? And that's how it started.
So one of the things I was fascinated with in your story is the sort of crowd of angry women who have been wronged by Will Bloom. And you start to wonder, basically, is it one of them? And if so, which of them? In terms of criminal behavior and who actually goes and kills people, men are much more likely to than women. There are many more men behind bars for killing than women, and women only seem to actually do this when they are really, pushed in a corner. And so, what you keep wondering is, did one of the women, get their husband or boyfriend to, or did one of these women actually do this? Because there does seem to be a crowd of angry women. How much thinking did you put into this whole idea? Because one of the things I always, when I'm teaching creative writing, I'll have a student that will be like, and then this woman, picked up a gun or picked up a knife, and I'm like, and went and killed someone. I'm like, really? Would she? For the first time in her life? Doesn't seem like she's really cornered here. So I always, have to ask, is this person really up for it? So how much thinking did you do about that question?
I did a lot because I actually read a ton of mystery stories, and it drives me nuts that there's so many weak women in these stories. And I'm not saying weak, but that women, I think, are often portrayed as victims, and I just can't stand it because I think that women are intelligent and they're in relationships and they do start to realize when someone is off. And in so much mysteries, in so many mysteries, there are women like everyone is telling them, oh, this guy, he's like terrible and you're married to him, or this guy is like, doing terrible things, and it drives me nuts. So I really wanted like these women to be the intelligent and strong warriors, kind of like they're the people that sort of like move everything forward. And I don't really think that women just like pick up guns and shoot people or do other things or poison people. But I think in this case, the woman is protecting someone who she thinks is is a victim of this person's sort of malfeasance, which is sexual malfeasance, and that she just is driven to the point where she just can't think of anything else. So to me, I wanted the man to be the weak and the I like men, by the way. I just wanted the man to be the one who might have the faults and the not being catching the social clues that women often are portrayed as not catch. I think women catch all the social clues. So I wanted it to be sort of a flip of the man being the one who, even though he is the head, he's kind of the protagonist. He's not a very nice protagonist, and the women are all very smart around him. But a woman driven to this would only be driven by a certain desperation to save someone, because I think women tend to be the people that save other people.
So speaking of warriors, in your book as well, there's a woman warrior sort of person, and she is also smarter than the men in the room. Yeah, she needs to have one of those black women jobs. So when she talks to the police and they tell her who to look for, she uses her head and looks for someone else. And that's you've heard me say many times, that's one of my favorite parts of the whole book. So I'd love you to talk with the audience a little bit about how you got to that part, because there's this great, just the idea of this black woman going to the police station, being told information, deciding they're wrong. It's just so fantastic.
Thank you. Well, for me, and she's talking about the Amanda character, and so Amanda is the best friend of the woman who gets kidnapped, and Amanda is fearless, she's feisty, she's ferocious, she's courageous, she's brave, but she's also flawed in that she doesn't always think about the consequences of her actions, and she's sort of like a bull in the china shop. But that's the kind of person that if I went missing and one of my friends wanted to take on the cops, that's the person I would want to do that. So for her, this is just the natural progression of who she is as a person. She reveres her best friend because they're so close. And so for her, not only is she working to save someone she considers a sister, she can't imagine her life without Fiona in it. And they are, fast and fearless best friends. They do everything together. And Fiona was the person who sort of brought her out of her shell when she was first admitted to college. So she went from this young high school girl to becoming a woman, and she owes a lot of that to Fiona. And so for her, it's more about her wanting to protect her friend. And she's like, of course, I want you guys to do everything you can. And what you're telling me that you're going to do does not make sense, especially given all the things that you know. And so she's like, I'm not going to listen to you. I'm going to go around you and figure out how I can make my friend be found. The other thing, too, is that Amanda harbors some guilt because the night that Fiona gets kidnapped is the very night she tells her, well, I'm not going to go out and party with you. It's Halloween. And everybody's going out to hang out on Halloween. And she's like, well, I'm not going to go hang out on Halloween. I've got to study, and plus I've got to work, and plus she works at like a diner. So she's going to see everybody who's been partying all night at the diner afterwards anyway. So she's like, well, I'm not going to go. But she feels this intense amount of guilt because she didn't go. And she's like, well, I owe this to Fiona to find her. So the fact that this is her best friend, coupled with the guilt and coupled with, the fact that she really wants to make sure the cops are doing everything they can, in many ways assuages her guilt. And she feels as though this will help her be able to move forward. I don't think that she thinks that, she's not going to listen to the police just because she doesn't want to. It's just a culmination of factors that, for her makes sense to her. And she's young. When you're young, you're impulsive, you do all kinds of things. You don't even think twice about them, even if they may put you in grave danger.
So one of the characters that was one of my favorite characters, and I thought was one of the most interesting in your novel, is the disabled man. And so there's a number of people that the cops are kind of suspicious of. One is, of course, the Latino gardener, because he has a history with having been incarcerated, even though it's pretty obvious he didn't do it. But they do kind of wonder about him, and the other is this disabled man because he kind of walks around the campus and also seems oddly suspicious. And I was kind of curious how you came up with that character.
I had a very close relationship with someone I worked with, an alum I worked with, and he had gone through a horrible, horrible car accident. He was in a bike, and he always said that he was very arrogant before he went through the car accident or the bike accident, and afterwards he was left with a horrible limp. And it changed his life. He was no longer physically able to do the things that he used to do, and he said that that actually was a reckoning for him. And so I loved that whole idea of being on one side of the world and then on the other side where people look at you and think you're less because of the way you physically look. And then the second thing, I wanted him to be like a Boo Radley character. So I think that we look at anybody who's the other and a lot of times don't treat them very kindly. And so I wanted that as part, and we often ascribe to them very dark sort of behavior when that may not be true. So I wanted that, but I also wanted him to have a fantasy life that was full of wonder and magic. And that's the way that he survived. So he has like a very active fantasy life. He believes that he has wings. He loves comic books, and he sees the world in a completely different way than everybody else does. And he loves, he loves someone. And I think that that was just a way to sort of illuminate what it's like maybe to be the other person that everyone thinks is weird or other. And then the other thing is that one night I was coming back from a trip really late at night, and I heard on my street this like clunk 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 clunk, and it was like 10 or 11 o'clock at night, and I looked back and some guy was walking down the middle of my street with a roller bag, and he had a big like coat on, and I don't live anywhere near like an airport or anything, and I'm like, why is this guy walking down my street at 11 o'clock at night in a roller bag with a roller bag? And so I thought, I'm going to write about that. So that's why.
I love it, the inspiration late at night. So very differently, don't want to give too much away, but the serial killer is sort of a good-looking person in your book. And one of the things I thought of when I was first reading it was in some of Melville's stories, Billy Budd particularly, he basically says in Billy Budd that very good-looking people are also good inside. And that's a very 19th century kind of an idea. I think we tend to not believe that. In fact, I think some people think that models are dumb, which they are of course not necessarily. Anybody could be either smart or stupid. But I do think that in our culture, we think of a certain amount of goodness around good-looking people, and as you say in your book, if someone is disfigured, we will in our culture sometimes tend to be suspicious of them. And so part of the reason the police have not caught up with our bad guy, is that he is a good-looking guy hanging around. So what were you thinking about with this Jamie Lannister kind of guy there?
I love that reference. I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. So for me, I think it's because when we think of people who are killers, and we've all heard the stereotypes of, oh, he kept to himself, he was very quiet. It's one of those things that when you're a reporter and you're interviewing people on the block who have someone who's done something horrible, and it's the last person you would suspect. But in this case, with Ben and with Corinthia too, they're beautiful, and people don't equate evil with things that are beautiful. They just don't. It's the last thing you would expect. And so for me, I was trying to build a world where I would catch the reader by surprise in many ways. And their characterization was deliberate. I didn't want you to think that Well, the reader already knows who they are, but the police and everyone else around them don't. And it's probably because, they dub him the coed killer 2.0 or something like that, and he's like the kind of preppy murder. I study serial killers, by the way. So it's sort of like, this whole thing where the last person you suspect is the most beautiful person in the room, because, of course, the most beautiful person and the most wealthy person in the room could never do something like this. Um, and so that's where I was going when I was writing both of the characters.
Right.
Yeah.
Because wealthy people never do anything wrong at all. Um,
Oops, no comment.
So on that note, I wanted to see if any of you have any questions that you would like to add. And again, they've asked if you could come up to that microphone if you're asking a question, because they are filming. So does anyone have a question?
So this question's for Aliah. How did your journalism experience play into writing this, and what inspired you to write this book and switch from reporting to fiction?
Thank you so much for that question. And are you KT?
I am Katie.
Thank you. This is the author, KT Witt. So to answer your question, it's a twofold, maybe threefold question. So for me, I'd always wanted to write a novel. Ever since I was a little kid, I'd always wanted to write a novel. I think anyone who writes professionally wants to, at some point, write a book. My journalism career, for me, played into this, and I was a journalist for a long time. I still consider myself a journalist, even though I'm not doing daily newspapering or reporting every day anymore, but I do edit all the time. For me, I relied heavily on research, because when you're a journalist, you research a lot. So I am also completely and totally frightened by things that are plausible. So I'm not the things like, the slasher type horror films, that stuff is really scary. But what scares me is hearing something crash in your kitchen in the middle of the night when you know there's nobody that's supposed to be down there, or hearing something growling in the basement, or having someone sneak up on you, or being kidnapped. Those are things that are plausible. And I think that the things that are plausible are truly very frightening. So I wanted to explore that fear. And I'm a huge fan of crime fiction, procedural dramas, court dramas, justice, and all of that's woven within the book. I was a police reporter and a court reporter for a long time. I've sat in courtrooms, covered mob trials, I've covered murder trials, some big ones actually for AP. But for me, being able to draw on the many years of experience actually helped informed the things that I wanted to write about, and how I did a lot of the research. Because I also think that when you research things and there's some kernel of truth, that can actually help make the story more plausible and therefore more frightening. Anyone else? Oh, okay.
So, this is your first novel for both of you. How did it feel when you finally found out that your book was going to get published? And then how has it felt when people have read your book and commented on it?
Can I go first?
It was great. My lovely, beautiful publisher told me that she was interested in publishing it, and it was actually very surprising. I work at a small liberal arts college, probably not for much longer, but so I never expected it to be published while I was there, which has been very interesting, because I would say it reflects more when I first came to that sort of educational institution, and it was before the Me Too movement, and we didn't have a lot of policies in place, and there was a really crazy vice president who had bottles of bourbon under his desk that he would drink every day, and he was having, let's say, relationships with lots of people on campus. And now that wouldn't happen. But I can't say it wouldn't happen because I keep looking in the news and like the National Realtor Association, who basically had to disband because this stuff is still happening. So anyway, I digress. So it was really wonderful. And I would say that it's been really heartwarming to hear people, like people write to you and say, so far no one has written to me and said, I don't like your book, but I've seen reviews that have said that. But most people that write you are very kind. And I also find reading groups very interesting because they ask questions that, I haven't thought of, or things that I'm not sure I thought through maybe in the back of my mind, and they find things in it that you didn't necessarily, that maybe you were subconsciously thinking, but they kind of bring them out. So that's been really, really fascinating. And it is going to be an ongoing series, so it helps me also to sort of would that be a great through line for something in the future? So thank you for the question.
What she said. But seriously, for me, the day that my agent sent me the note and told me that you were interested in the book, I jumped up and grabbed my phone and I showed it to my son who's in the audience. And I was like, can you read this for me? I was too stunned and shocked and just pleased and just so excited. I started screaming. I was jumping around. I was so happy that I was finally getting my book published, and because it was something that I'd worked on and I was really, really proud of. And the reaction has been overwhelming. So my pub day was on Tuesday, and I had dozens of people sending me stuff, especially on Instagram, just raving about the book. I saw a review today, and it was like some of these people totally got exactly what I wanted to convey. And then I've seen some, just a handful of people that didn't like it, people who were mad because it wasn't predictable or because I just, for me though, it was just the dream come true. I love the fact that the book is published. I love the fact that people are actually excited and loving it and want to know what happens, after the ending. So it's been gratifying. It's been totally gratifying. And I thank God for that. It's just a wonderful opportunity.
I don't know if I need a microphone, but this is for Aliah. Funny you mentioned your journalism. It's a little tempting to ask, how much from real life did you draw on? But I decided I really didn't want to know. So
I didn't kill anyone.
That's one thing I can put to bed then. Thank you. But so with all your experience as a journalism, I mean, obviously you have a great writing talent, but they're two very different kinds of writing. And so, it's so based in fact during doing journalism, but yet this is, again, please God, hopefully fiction. So is there any kind of transition you have to do, or is it just walking out of one door and into the other in terms of how you go about it?
I don't think so. For me, it was just, one day I'm putting on the writer hat and I'm writing the book, and then the next day I'm doing, what I normally do in my day-to-day, which is not kill people. But
Actually, I meant more real life in journalism, the stories you cover.
Oh, yeah, well, I mean, yeah, so so everything when you're a writer, you draw on a lot from your own personal background. So for me, there were things that I'd seen and heard and covered, things that I saw on television, things that I witnessed in the news, just current events, pop culture. You draw from everything when you're writing, and you manage to pull it all together. I think I'm answering your question.
Just wondering if it was hard to go from being based in facts to.
Oh, no. Because for me, it's I'm crafting a world. So it's world building. And I talk about this a lot on my TikTok, which is Aliah Wrights, at Aliah Wrights, by the way, if anyone wants to follow me. But for me, it's I do a lot of research and I do a lot of outlining. So I have a roadmap to where I want to go. And that actually helps me in that way. And it also helps me overcome writer's block, because I know which path I'm going down when I get to a point. And I try to write to almost to cliffhangers. so that if I'm getting to a section where I'm like, oh, this is really good, it makes me want to go right back to that section so I can keep writing and not go back to the beginning and reread. So there's a lot of little tips and tricks that I learned from just writing in the past. And I didn't use outlines, of course, as a reporter. You're just writing a story. You know the who, what, when, where, and why, and how. But with a novel, it's a lot different. It's different. Writing a book is different from writing for newspapers. It's different from writing for television. It's different from writing for radio. It's all those things. And I had to learn how to do that. I studied for 4 years to go to journalism school to become a journalist. I went and did writers' workshops to learn how to write a book, like the structure of writing a book, how that differs, because it's not the same. It's not the same at all.
I think we have time for another question. Yeah.
Congratulations to both of you.
Thank you.
I know this is a lot of work, but Aliah, I've been asking you this for a long time. You've never given me the answer. How did you? You are a beautiful African American woman, and there's two young white characters, and you got them down so well, and I'm just fascinated. You know, we all know different types of people, but how you were able to write in that voice, and it kind of reminds me of the writer in Angela's Ashes. He was so good because he was able to write.
I love that
I know he was able to write in a child's voice. But how were you able to do that? I've asked you for years. How did you do it?
To get into their voice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I have a lot of nieces and nephews. And I watched them at play. And I remember vividly what it was like to be a child. I was just telling my fiance a couple of days ago that when I was a kid, I used to climb trees and used to drive my mother crazy. But I taught my brothers how to climb trees to the point where my mother was so afraid that, and I kept falling out of them too. So my dad built us a tree house. And I remember like those years of, and that's in the book. I remember those years of what it was like to be a kid, and to go back and to relive that and to think about the things that, kids do, how they play. I watched two of my nieces one year over Christmas, and they were arguing over a lollipop, and one takes the pop out of her mouth and she just gives it to her sister. And I'm like, oh, and I raised a child, but to see children do that, it's like, so these things, you pay attention to the children that are around you. You recall the memories that you have from your own childhood, and even the things that you see in pop culture. To write in that voice of small children, I can remember, saying, Jinx, you owe me a soda, that kind of thing, how kids are when they're playing tag and how they can fight over the smallest, pettiest of things, if they're not it, those kinds of things. I grew up in Philadelphia, and so we played a lot outdoors, and I don't know, kids don't do that as much anymore, but now they're sitting in front of a screen doing something other than just being outside being kids. But I remember what it was like to be outside and just, you had to entertain yourselves. And so these kids grow up before the internet. So they're growing up in the 90s before, not before the internet, but they're growing up before the internet became what it is today, where it's so ubiquitous and it's everywhere. So I drew a lot from, just from my own background, and from no research required for that one. It's just what I lived as a kid myself.
I just want to say, whoever you are, friend of Aliah back there, having grown up with creepy white Christians, I could not believe how much she had captured these creepy white Christian children, having grown up with creepy white Christian children. I was just like, Aliah, you're freaking me out. You were watching me grow up. Seriously. I mean, it was freaky reading this whole part. So I'm with you. I do not know who she follows around, but yeah, I'm with you, friend of Aliah back there. So on that note, I just want to say that both of these writers were absolutely amazing and a joy to work with. I just introduced Percival Everett at an event a couple nights ago, and one of the things I said about him was that most writers think that they're God and are always telling you how important they are, and he did not ever tell me how important he is. And that's also true of these two writers. They're just always a pleasure to work with and always amazing to be around. And I know they're going to be here to sign books. I should encourage both of you guys, though. One of Percival's things that he always tells his students and tells other writers is, don't take your reviews seriously. Just keep writing. So on
That's
that
great
note,
advice.
thank you all so much for coming
Thank
tonight.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.